everyone, and welcome to a video tutorial for this Cherry Blossom Cat Headband or collar. So we hope you enjoy it. Please like, share and subscribe, and we hope to see you soon. She's ready to go. Okay, so to make this Cherry Blossom headband or collar, depending how you want to use it, you'll need some yarn, and I'm using Cherry Blossom colours because I'm making this as a cherry blossom. But you know, you could make this. There's just a standard flower pattern that I'm going to show you, and I'm doing them in colours to, you know, kind of show that they're cherry blossoms. I'm filming this in springtime, so it's timely for it to be cherry blossoms. Now these are all about a 2-weight cotton acrylic blend, and I've got a raspberry, a pale pink and a white. I'm going to make 3 different cherry blossoms, matching the colours. Now you get to decide how many cherry blossoms you want to make and how you place them on the headband or collar. I'm going to only make 3, but you can make as many as you like, okay, and spread them around the collar as you want to. Lots of creative, you know, leeway there. Now for the headband or collar part, you'll want a chunkier yarn. Now I've got this one here. It's 100% acrylic. It's this forest green, and it's probably about a 6 weight. Let's say it's a bulky weight. Now you want for the headband or collar piece, you want it to be relatively sturdy, okay? So especially if you want it as a headband. But you don't want it too big and bulky, but you also don't want it, you know, fine and delicate. Otherwise, it's just, as a headband, it's just not going to stay on your cat. And it's also not going to support the blossoms, okay? So that's what I'm going for. If you can find something similar to that, then it's you know, recommended. Now you'll probably need 2 different hook sizes. In fact, definitely you will. This 2.5mm I'm using for the cherry blossoms. I want them to be quite petite and delicate, so I'm going for 2.5mm. And then for the headband or collar part, I'm using a 4mm. Now, this is a lot smaller than what my yarn recommends, but I don't want the headband to be too bulky, okay? I want it to be kind of, you know, that just right. So I want it to be, you know, firm and, you know, sturdy enough to do its job, but I also don't want it too big and bulky. So I'm mitigating the effect of the bulky yarn a little bit by using a slightly smaller hook size. Okay, so that's entirely up to you. You'll work that for yourself. Now, I'm using 2 different needles. I'm using the larger one, which I'll use with the bulky yarn to sew my headband collar together. And then I've got this smaller one that I'll use for the cherry blossoms. Okay, sewing those onto, it's got a kind of a pointier end. So I'll be sewing my cherry blossoms onto my headband with this smaller needle. So you might want 2 needles as well. You'll need some scissors, of course, to snip your ends, and a tape measure is always recommended to take some measurements of either your cat's neck circumference and or their head circumference, okay? Sometimes with these types of collars where you just slip them over the head, it might be a good idea to have a measurement, just a rough idea of how wide your cat's head is, so how much leeway you need to leave to slip it over your cat's head. That's really only if your cat has a neck that is, you know, perhaps a lot smaller or a lot larger than their head width. Okay, so if they've got quite a fine neck but quite a wide head, then you want to make adjustments for those proportions if you're to slip it over your cat's head. So always worth having a few measurements. The more measurements you can have, generally the better. I know it's not always easy measuring your cat, but if you've got at least a ballpark, you can try as you go and and refine from there. But good to have a tape measure handy for some measurements. Okay, so to make this Cherry Blossom Cat Headband or collar, you'll need to know how to make a magic ring. So this is talking about the cherry blossoms, how to make a magic ring, how to single crochet, half double crochet and triple crochet, and that's to make these petals. Some basic sewing techniques just to add this little center area here. You'll need to know for the band, for the headband or collar, you'll need to know how to slip knot onto your hook, how to make a small chain, single crochet, and I'll show you how to make this sort of flattened cord or collar area, okay, or headband area. So I'll show you how to make that. It's a very simple technique, and you know, it's just slightly different to what we normally do, but it's just using single crochets. Okay, so I'll show you how to do that, and then from there you'll just be sewing the ends of the band together and sewing the cherry blossoms onto the headband however you want them, or the collar however you want them to sit. So I've just made them in this little cluster. It's up to you how you want to sew them on. Yeah, from there, that's pretty much it. Just, sewing in weaving in your ends, and it's a pretty quick and simple project to get finished. So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start off by making our cherry blossoms, and I've got 2 that I've made here already. So we're going to make the petals, and then we're going to sew these little strands on. Okay, so I've made obviously one in pale pink with raspberry strands, and then I've made one that doesn't show up as well on camera, but I've made one white one with pale pink strands, and I'm going to make a raspberry. So choose your color that you're making the petals with. I'm going to make mine in raspberry, and take your smaller hook, and you'll make a magic ring. However you do that. Now, these videos are suitable for beginners, but just bear in mind that I'm assuming that you've got a few basic techniques under your belt, okay? Including, making a magic ring, how to do these basic stitches. So I use US terminology. So yeah, if you're British, then you'll just have to, convert those over. Okay, so we're going to place 5 single crochet into our magic ring. So that's 1 and 2, 3, 4 and 5. And then we're going to close our magic ring by pulling on the tail. You don't need to close it all the way, but just, give that a bit of a tug to close up. And then we're going to slip stitch into the first stitch to finish that first round. Okay, so you've got your little center piece. Now, if you want to close that again, you can, but just remember that because we're going to be sewing this little central piece here, you want to be able to squeeze your needle through the little central hole. So just keep that in mind as you move along. So we're going to chain 1 here, and here's where we make our petals. So into that same stitch that you slip stitched into, so right there, you're going to place a half double crochet. So into that same space that you slip stitched into. Then you're going to place a double crochet in the same space. So each petal is the same. Then you're going to place a triple crochet in the same space. So all this goes in the same stitch. Then a double crochet, so we're mirroring what we've just done to shape our petal. A double crochet, and then a half double crochet to finish off that first petal. Okay, now you're going to work that in each of your next 4 stitches, so that will be a total of 5 stitches. Now what you need to be really careful of is most likely your first petal has covered that next stitch. So you need to just move that petal out of the way a little bit to access that next stitch. Okay, and then you're just going to repeat the same process. So your half double crochet first, then your double crochet, then your triple crochet, double crochet and half double crochet. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that in each of my 5 stitches. So you'll have 5 petals, and I'll meet you at the end of this round. Okay, so I've finished off my 5 petals there. Now we're just going to slip stitch underneath the chain, your chain 1 in the beginning of the round. Slip stitch in there and then yarn over and pull through. So you finished your little flower. So just leave enough for weaving in at the back. And pull nice and tight on that end. And you can just move your petals around a little bit if they need it. Now you can see I've left a bit of a hole in the center there so I can sew my contrasting color. Now I think I'm going to sew with, well, I've got my colors, my other colors here. I think I'll sew with my white. Sew this center part. Let's see how it looks. So take your smaller needle and just thread your end. And what I do is I come up through the hole in the center and I pull out a good length, so I've got enough to do the whole area. So we're going to go around twice. Okay, so I put how I do this, and you can do this however you want to, but I just place the needle into the center of the petal there, and then I'll move around. I'll come up through the center again and just make sure that lies flat, and then I'm going to go into the center of the next petal, but I'm altering the length of all these little strands, okay, just to make them look a little bit more sort of natural. And then I'll come up through the center again, move around to the next petal and place my next strand, come up. So I'm going to end up with around 10 strands. And you can make as many strands as you want, but I'm going to go around twice. So I'm going to place one in line with each petal, and then I'm going to go around and put one in between each petal. So you can, like I said, you can sew these in whatever way you want them to be, and whatever length, however you want them to look. Just make sure that first one sits flat by gently pulling on your end. Now I'm going to go around again. So come up through the center. This is why you need a sort of a sharper needle here. And then see now I'm lining up with in between the petals. So I'll do a second round. And you don't have to do the second round if you like it just with the, with the 5 strands, just leave it like that. You can do as many as you want here. And yeah, this is when if you've made your center, you've pulled your magic ring too tight, then you'll have a bit of trouble getting your needle in. But if it's nice and sharp, you should be able to get that up and through the center. And then in between the petal. So yeah, you'll make these look however you want to. I've got 2 more strands to do, so I'll just pause here and do that off camera. So I'll see you in a moment. Okay, so there I've completed my strands. So I'm just going to, I've left plenty of length. Now you want to leave a good amount of length on the center color, the center strand, center ends, so you can sew it onto your headband. So I'm going to just chop those off there. And then I'm going to weave in my petal colors at the back here. Okay, so I'm going to leave my strands, and actually you just need to be a little bit careful they don't get all tangled up in there. So what I'm going to do with this, firstly I'm just going to take this strand color and I'm just going to bring it towards the center. Now I like to leave 2 sewing ends. So I'm just going to bring this down towards the center just so I've got it at the center with the other one. But I like to leave 2 sewing strands just because it allows me to sew more symmetrically. But you can just leave 1 if you want to weave in one of these tail ends that you'll use for sewing. You can just use 1. Like I said, I prefer to use 2. So now I'm just going to weave in these weave in these tail ends of my main flower colour. So you'll just, I'm kind of assuming that you know how to do this. You'll just take your end and just secure it in the back there underneath some of those stitches. Okay, so go ahead and weave in those two tail ends, and I'll do the same, and I'll meet you once we've done that. And of course, once you've woven them in, you'll just snip off the excess. So I'll finish off weaving in my second tail, and I'll see you shortly. Okay, so I've got my 3 little cherry blossoms there. So you make as many as you want, just repeating this exact same process in whatever colours you want to use. And now we're going to move on to making the headband. So take your green or your chunkier yarn, and you'll make a slip knot onto your hook. And then we're going to chain 2. Now because I've got a smaller hook size, it might just split a little. Oops, yes, it has split. Excuse me. Let's just go back to my slip knot. And 1 and 2. So that's, that's always the thing. If you've got a smaller hook size compared to your yarn and it's got these strands, then it might split a little bit. But for me, it's the trade-off that I want to make. So you've got your chain 2. Now you're going to single crochet into that first chain, or the second chain from the hook. And then what we're going to do from here is we're actually not going to be working into our stitches, okay? So we're going to be actually turning our work away from us, and you'll see that you've got this loop here. Now, to start with, you've just got 1 loop. So you're going to insert your hook into that loop, and you're going to single crochet into that loop, okay? So just bring your hook underneath and single crochet. Now turn again, and from here on out you're going to have 2 loops. Okay, so work your hook under those 2 loops and single crochet. And then you're just going to repeat that. So you're going to turn it away from you, insert your hook under these 2 loops, and 2, and single crochet under those 2 loops and turn. So you just keep working it like that, working under those 2 loops, single crochet, turn, until you get to the length that you want your headband or collar to be. Now, if you're going to make it as a headband, you want it to be able to just sit on the head, not too tight, probably not too loose. Because how this works up, it works up kind of flat, so it just helps it sort of sit on the cat's head a little bit better than something that is roundish. So this is what I found works best for, just keeping things on Melba's head. So, and it also works fine as a collar as well. So decide how you're going to use this. If your cat just doesn't want anything on their head, which is completely understandable, lots of cats don't, then you can just make this as a pretty little collar. And then you'll allow the neck circumference plus the extra that you need to slip this over your cat's head. Okay, so usually, just as a general rule, you would take your cat's neck circumference. So for example, Melba's is 24 centimeters. You would add 1 to 2, maybe maximum 3 if your cat has quite a wide head, to that neck circumference to get the length that you need to make your collar. So Melba's would be about, she's got quite a fine head, so I don't need to allow a lot extra. I usually allow about 1 centimeter extra. If you allow too much, it'll sit too loosely around the neck. It won't be an actual, like a collar. But you also don't want it to be too tight. Okay, and if your cat doesn't like things being slipped over their head, then make it even a little bit looser, just so they can, they feel comfortable with something, not as, it's not as bad for them just slipping over their head. So I'm going to go ahead and make this. I'm going to make it so I can make it a headband and a collar for Melba. So I'm going to go to about the sort of 27, 28 centimeter mark for the length of my my cord, or my my collar / headband. So go ahead and just continue making those same maneuvers. So the single crochet into those 2 loops, and then turn your work away from you. You can see how that's sort of coming out now. Okay. And yeah, keep on going. I'm going to keep moving on myself, and we'll meet back when we've done the length that we need for our headband or collar. Oh, and incidentally, something I just want to mention that you might be experiencing that is completely normal. Down at the beginning of the cord, the stitches, getting your hook into those loops will be a little bit more tricky. But as you move along, it should loosen up a little bit. And also just don't make your stitch too tight, okay? And you'll find it sort of loosens out. So don't make your single crochet too tight, and you'll find that it loosens out and becomes easier to work into those 2 loops. So I just wanted to add that in there in case you're experiencing it being a little bit tricky to get your hook into down at the beginning. It's normal. It starts to loosen out as long as you're not doing your single crochets too tight. Okay, so I've got my headband collar piece here. Now I've tried it on Melba, and I've actually ended up, to make it a headband, I've ended up making it about 30 centimeters. So that's just her dimensions. You'll have your own, your own size. Now I'm just going to yarn over and pull through, and just leave enough for sewing the 2 ends together, which doesn't need a lot. So I'll just snip that end off and give that a little tighten. Now, what you're going to do is sew the 2 ends of your band together. So what I tend to do is I tend to tie these together just to give me a little bit of an anchor. Just a simple knot. And then I'm just going to tidy that up with some sewing. So I'll just thread so I've got my larger needle here, and I'm just going to start to draw that in by sewing down the band. Okay, so I'll just tighten that in. See how it's kind of just tightening that in. Now what will happen is I'll need to use the other strand as well, so I tend to do them one at a time and then alternate, move over to the other one so I get a symmetrical sewing. So I use both the tail ends to sew. And now I'm going to go, so I went into that one with that one. Now I'm going to go across to this one and just sew down here. Now you just want to get it so you join those 2 ends together in a way that looks neat. Now I'm going to go back to my other strand. I'm going to come down. I'm going to come back down the edge, and I'm actually going to tidy up this end. So I'm going to bring it down into the other side again. And I'm just going to tidy up this edge. Now, what you can do, depending on how you're sewing your cherry blossoms on, you can sew your cherry blossoms over top of this join, okay, to even hide it further, or you can just leave it at the back. So I'm going to do the same with the other side, and I'm going to move back through. So when you double back, just always never doubling back exactly where you've come, otherwise it'll just obviously unravel. So I'm going to go down and into the side of this other one just to even up that join. So I'm going to finish this off. You don't need to watch me fighting with this to get this through. So I'm going to finish off neatening up that join, and I'll meet you once I've done that. Okay, so I've got my join relatively neat there. It's not the neatest join I've ever done, but it's relatively neat. And I'm going to sew my cherry blossoms over top of it anyway. But you just snip off the excess once you've woven in those ends. And so there's my headband collar area. Now you get to decide how you want to place your cherry blossoms, as I said at the beginning. So I'm going to actually place mine all in a little cluster in one area. So I'm going to sew, because my headband is, you know, relatively wide. Now I'll just decide which one. I think I'll put the white one to the back and keep these other two towards the front. So I'm going to do something that kind of looks a bit like that. Okay, so I can sew one towards the top of the band, one from underneath, and one sort of on you know, in the center. So I'm going to put my white one on first. So I'm going to use my smaller needle, and we've got Melba here. She's going to probably rock the table, so let's prepare for that. Okay, so I'm going to sew this onto the top here. So, you know, there's no specific way to do this. You'll just sew your cherry blossoms where you want them to be. So you can space them around the neckband or collar. You could space them all the way around. That would also look really cute too if you make a few extra cherry blossoms. But I want to do this little cluster. Now when you're sewing on here, you probably want to come up and underneath the, see, I'm just coming up and underneath. So try and grab a couple of stitches under there and just avoid it coming through to the front. Okay, you don't want that to come through the front. Now I've sewn one on there. Yeah, here's Melba. She's going to rock my table. And then I'm going to take the other strand and sew that on as well. So what I find, as I said before, is with two strands, I just find it helps to keep it a little bit more symmetrical with my sewing rather than just having one strand. Okay, so there's my first cherry blossom going on there, and I'll just sew this one up and into the back, and I'll probably go up and back a couple of times. But as I did with the join, I tend to do one of the strands and then do the next one, and then see if I need to do any extra. If it's how secure, see how secure it is, and just work my way one by one. So I want this to sort of sit on the top. So what I'll do is I think I'll just leave that as that is for now. I won't finish off those ends, and I'm just going to sew my next one on. So I'm going to go ahead and finish off placing these how I want them placed, and you do the same however you're placing yours. I think this would look quite cool if they were all sort of placed around the band as well. I think that would look kind of cute. But I'm gonna do this way for today. So I'm gonna sew on my other two cherry blossoms, and I'll show you how mine have finished up when I've done that. So I'll see you shortly. Okay, so I've sewn on my little cluster of cherry blossoms. So now all that's left, so I don't sew them on one at a time and then weave in my ends. I wait till the end to weave in my ends, just in case I need to make any little adjustments. But I'm happy with that. I think that looks kind of cute. So I'm going to now just finish off by weaving in my ends. Now you can weave these in wherever you can, into either the back of the flower. If you want to weave them into the back of the headband, you can also do that, because obviously it's the back, so you won't see them, even if it's, you know, contrasting colors. I'm going to try and weave mine into the back of the flower though. So I'm just going to give myself a cleaner end there. And I'm going to weave them, I'm going to give it a try and weave them into the back of the flowers here. Let's see if I can do that. Oh, excuse my phone. So I'm just going to weave these ends into the back here. They don't have to be super secure, because it's, you know, it's not going to mean anything comes undone necessarily. But I'm just going to weave them into the back here. And then finish off. So I'm just going in behind the back and weaving in under there. So you just want to make sure that you don't move through to the front of the flower, and show it through to the other side. And I'm just going to go back one more time. So I'm going to do that for each of my flowers. So you weave in your ends wherever you want to weave them in. Like I said, you can just weave them into the back of the headband. That's also a good choice. So I'll see you shortly once I've done my weaving in, and we'll finish off together. Okay, so there's my little cherry blossom headband collar all finished. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, just a little bit of fun for the beginning of springtime. And I had a request for a flower headband, so hopefully this fits the bill. And yeah, please send your photos along to catventurers.community@gmail.com, or you can tag us on social media at catventurous.crochet. I always love seeing your photos, meeting your cat, and seeing your creativity. So please, if you have the time, please send those along. And yeah, please like, share and subscribe to our channel. New videos uploaded weekly. And thanks for being here. Hope to see you soon. Okay, bye. Ready? We do one more? Okay, Melba. Okay. Ready? Hi everyone, and welcome to this video tutorial for our cat. Ready, Melba? Hi everyone, and welcome to our video tutorial for this cat cherry blossom hat. Thanks. Bye. Okay.